Are you tired of feeling like you're walking on eggshells every time you have a conversation with your partner? Did you know that couples who struggle to create an emotionally safe space are more likely to experience heightened stress, anxiety, and even relationship breakdowns? And you may say, of course, I know. I am the walking definition of that. We are experiencing that in our relationship even right now. And that's why I'm listening. Or maybe you're saying that, you know, man, isn't that the fact? Isn't that true? Because you know what it is. So in this video, I'll share with you four important building blocks that you need to create an emotionally safe space that actually works. This is so, so important. I cannot emphasize the importance of an emotional safe space for your marriage, for your relationship. This is where I think most marriages fail. They just don't have this safe space to be able to have difficult conversations, feel safe and feel heard, feel understood. Isn't that what you're after in your relationship? Would you say that is important for you? I would. I know that this is not something that is easily set up or created. Many couples don't even know what this is like. So what is an emotional safe space? It's a safe space where you and your partner can have deep conversations, difficult conversations, and feel like having them is something that deepens your relationship more than anything else. You feel connected. Like I just said, you feel heard, you feel understood. And so I want you to picture your marriage as a cozy home where you and your partner feel valued, understood, accepted, no matter what. I've been married for 38 years as of this recording. So I have had my share of experiencing difficult conversations where I felt, and my wife also can say, if she was here, attest to the fact that she felt unheard. I felt unheard. I didn't feel understood. And she will say she never felt understood at those times. Now, we have since corrected that. And so, what I'm sharing here is both from a professional standpoint as a licensed marriage and family therapist and a certified relationship coach, but also from a personal standpoint as having been married for 38 years. As you can imagine, we've had our ups and downs, our roller coaster. I remember times where we have had difficult conversation and it did not end well. Thank God it did not end in some cases as some marriages have ended in divorce or separation. Thank God we never had either of those. I would not be here talking about this if we had ended in divorce. Maybe not. Maybe I would have learned some lessons. And also, we never had a separation, and I thank God. And I'm not somehow if you've experienced that, I feel your pain. I've worked with so many couples who have shared the pain of what it means when they don't feel emotionally safe and have experienced the wrath of their partners. And some have even escalated to places where they just don't even have them anymore. They don't even bring them up anymore. And maybe you're one of those persons who would rather not bring something up because it's better for you not to do that because you know the consequences, right? And so the avoidant technique is being applied. Maybe you are a conflict avoidant person, and so you don't bring things up. You just let it go by, and you suffer as a result of that. You feel disconnected. You feel distant from your partner because you're not having this emotional safe space to have these conversations that are important to you. It's very important if it has to do with, finances or the children or in-laws or just your relationships, right? Your relationship in essence. So it's a challenge. And that's why I believe these four foundational bricks or blocks are so important when it comes to your relationship. Um, I used to think emotional safety meant avoiding conflict at all costs. And maybe you are like me when I thought that. A part of me is still somewhat conflict avoidant, but I thank God that I've learned with God's help how to manage those conversations or those moments much, much better than I did in the early stages of my relationship. I've learned that true safety comes from knowing that you can be vulnerable without fear of judgment. And that's why I think so many people are don't have so many people are couples are not having these deep conversations that really are important for deep connection. The first block or brick that I believe is so important is a foundational brick of trust, right? This is so important because if you don't feel that you can trust your partner, that he or she has your back, right? Then you're not going to feel safe in your relationship. You're not going to feel like you can have conversations and believe that he or she will understand or trust that they will recognize is your deeper attempt to connect in the relationship. It is a cornerstone. Trust is a cornerstone of any emotional safe space. It's like laying a solid foundation for your marriage to thrive on. Imagine building a house, and if you don't have a solid foundation, where the house is going to be, can withstand the pressures, the hurricanes, the storms, the winds that blow against it, and you can have the trust that it's going to stand. You would not want to be in that house when those things come. I live in an area where we experience hurricanes from time to time. And I remember one really bad year when we one of our ceilings in our family room caved in. It just came tumbling down, and it's so unfortunate because what happened was my wife was out there. It was raining, raining, raining. It was a hurricane season, and we saw the water start coming through and drifting down in our family room. And my wife was, I was trying to do other things at the same time, and she was trying to, as a team, trying to do everything we possibly can to, mop the floor and keep it dry and keep it from, flooding the house. And so we brought a bucket in, and she was in there at that time in that room, and she was putting a bucket under to catch the water, and she didn't realize so much water was already on the floor, and she slipped and fell. And thank God she didn't hurt herself too, seriously, but it just shows you what can happen when you don't have when you experiencing a hurricane. But one thing we do know, thank God, our house was on a solid foundation that we knew. The roof was given way, but the house was stand. The wind was howling and it was blowing so hard, but thank God it stood. Why? Because the house had a solid foundation, right? And so it's an important aspect, and trust is one of those foundational bricks that is so important. It's one of the most important one, I would say, right? I love what the Bible said in Proverbs 3 verse 5. It says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. That's one of my favorite scripture verses. I've memorized that verse and so many times leaned on that verse because I recognize that God's plan for my life and for our relationship can strengthen the trust that we have. And that's why I think my wife and I have survived and all these many years, because we have this confidence and this foundation of trust in God and in ourselves. And there are times our trust in our relationship experienced great tension, but with God's grace and God's mercy, we were able to survive that moment. So trust is the first foundational piece, that you must trust that your partner have your back. You must trust that you have your partner back, and he or she knows that. The relationship must know that this is one area that you guys are going to hold fast, and that is simply saying, I'm going to trust that you have my best intention at heart, my best interest at heart. I'm saying intention, I'm sorry, your best interest at heart, and that what you're saying is not to hurt me, is not to destroy me, so to speak, but is to help me understand something I would not understand unless you felt that you could trust me with that information. So that's the first block. The second one is clear communication. Clear communication. It's like the road that leads to clear communication is that road that leads to emotional safety, right? It's about expressing your feelings openly and listening with empathy. It must be mutual. It must be a two-way street where you feel like you can say what you need to say to your partner and vice versa. You may have heard sometimes people say it's not what you say, but it's how you say what you say. Have you heard that before? And here's where I take odds with that because I believe it's both. I believe it's also what you say because you could say, it's how you say something, but what you're saying is also very important because I can say what I'm saying very nicely, very calmly, very lovingly, but what I said is painful. What I said, because sometimes people will say, for example, if you ask your partner about your weight, or how our clothes fit, and you've gained weight, they may say it nicely, but if they still say something about my weight, I'm not gonna be smiling and thanking, of course, I thank them that they were honest, but it's gonna hurt. So it's both. It's both what you say and how you say what you said, right? So it's about expressing your feelings openly and honestly, right? So it's listening also is very important, and that's where all the skills of communication comes into play. And you may have heard many of those before, active listening, reflective listening, curious questioning, um, observation statements, and all those different things you may have heard. That's all a part of clear communication. It is like a GPS, right, that you have that guides you on the road. So what happened in when you're doing clear communication, it's going to guide you in conversations with your partner that helps you ascertain or big test or gauge. That's the word I'm looking for. Gauge what is the tone, the temperature of the communication, and know what to do because of how you're gauging it. And that's the second block or brick. The third one is vulnerability and acceptance. Vulnerability and acceptance. This is huge. Vulnerability is the glue that holds emotional safety together, right? It's about being willing to share your fears, your dreams, your insecurities with your partner. But you see how important it is to have trust as the cornerstone. Why? Because when you are being vulnerable, you have to trust that your partner is going to handle your heart with care in a delicate manner because you're sharing your heart. You're becoming naked, so to speak, to your partner, and you're trusting that they're going to handle your heart with care. They're going to handle what you're hearing carefully and delicately. You know, the Bible verse that comes to my mind is James chapter 5, verse 16, that says, therefore, confess your sins to one another and pray for one another that you may be healed. So when you are being vulnerable, you're opening yourself, and it could be a wound that you're opening, and you want your partner to be able to come in and help you to heal that. And that's why the Bible says when you confess that, you talk about those things openly with vulnerability. That's being vulnerable because, and you have to feel very safe, right? So when you create this safe space, you're opening up this opportunity for your partner to be vulnerable and you to be vulnerable as well, because that's where you find healing. That's where you feel intimately connected with your partner. And this is so key. So many people are afraid of being vulnerable, and it's understandable so, because when they have been vulnerable in the past, it has been weaponized and used against them. And you may know what I'm talking about. Maybe you have done it yourself, right? Or have experienced that. And so that's why people fear sometimes being vulnerable, because they're afraid of what their partner may do with what they share and how they may use it. Sometimes they'll say they'll bring it up at a later time in a way to drive home a point or weaponize it against that person. So I can understand why sometimes vulnerability is very hard. But when you have a safe space created, then this will help you to be more vulnerable. And the fourth building block or brick, I think, is so, so important. And this one, you want to kind of hone in on this, because this is going to allow you to be more vulnerable. And that's why I should have put this one even before vulnerability. And this is building boundaries, setting boundaries in place, right? Because boundaries are like the fences, the guardrails that you're putting in place. Imagine, I remember one time when I was first learning how to bowl, and it was so it was so embarrassing, but I didn't care. I wanted to learn how to bowl, and they put up the guardrails. Have you ever gone bowling and had the guardrails up? Maybe you don't because you're a professional. I'm sorry, okay, but I wasn't at the time. And they had these guardrails, and when I, throw the ball, and it would not go off into the gutter because the guardrails kept it to keep in the lane, so at least it would hit at least one pin. So the thing is, over time, though, I became better. That even though the guardrails were available, I didn't have to have them because my bowling got better. I'm still not the best at it, but you understand the whole idea. Also, you know, the reason why you put fences around your home is to protect certain things, is to keep certain things out and keep certain things in. I have a little dog, and we have a backyard, and thank God it's closed in. It has a fence around it because we can be in our home and not worry about our dog getting out because the fence keeps him in. And so that's what boundaries are like. You are setting up, parameters and protective things that will protect the conversation, protect the relationship. It helps define what's acceptable and what's not in your relationship. So when you have boundaries set up, you're simply saying, what are some things are not going to be acceptable in our conversations, right? For example, no name calling, speak respectfully, listen attentively, listen respectfully, and so on. These are the boundaries that are going to allow you to be able to feel safe in that moment. That's what safe emotional safety looks like. Solomon said in Proverbs 25, verse 28, he says, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. Left without walls. It's a city without walls. And that is where when you feel so vulnerable, you feel open, you feel like anybody can come in and do whatever they want to. And that's why he says, when you have no self-control, you're like that. You're like a city that is being broken into, and you're left without walls. And so self-control is so important. And I think is one of the requirement of being able to respect boundaries is to have self-discipline or self-control, because you're going to be tempted. You're going to be pushed and have emotions rise in moments when you're hearing things that are not nice, or are maybe you didn't want to hear, but because you're creating a safe space, you're going to hear things, and your emotions are going to be impacted. There's no question your emotions are not going to be impacted, but because you have self-control and you're more emotional intelligent, right? And you're managing your emotions, you're regulating those emotions, then you're going to be able to restrain yourself and be present with what's happening. This is where boundaries, because you know the rules of the game and you know what's going to happen in the game, you feel safe. I played soccer and grew up many years playing soccer, and we had boundaries. We had to play within the parameters set up, right? We had the lines that were set up. If the ball went over those lines, it's an out, it went out of bounds. And so anytime it goes out of bounds, the referee blows the whistle and the other team gets the ball. So we had to operate by those boundaries that were set up, or rules of engagement, and that is what you're setting up in a safe space. So these four bricks or blocks are so important. Trust, communication, vulnerability, and boundaries. These are the building blocks of an emotional safe space. And the question becomes, which of these do you think are missing in your relationship? I would love to hear. I mean, just comment below and let me know which of these is missing in your relationship. And maybe you may even want to even add, why do you think it's missing in your relationship? You can comment below and let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. So if you're ready to create an emotionally safe space, but don't know where to start, and you're in need of some help, want to click the link in the comments below, or send me a direct message on Instagram at Kingsley Grant, and let's start a conversation. Maybe I'll send you some things that could begin to help you to how to start this. And I want to invite you also into my world, where when I do an upcoming webinar or a workshop and a webinar as well, you can be be notified of that and take advantage of that as well, because you'll learn more about this very thing I'm talking about. So please hit the subscribe button as this is one way of you to show your appreciation for this channel and the value I'm offering here as well. So with that said, my friend, until next time, watch this video right here on how you might be hurting your marriage without even knowing. You might be hurting your marriage, and this video will talk more about that. So you watch this video here. And until next time, my friend, God bless, peace out, and bye for now. I'll see you then.